For as long as I can remember, my existence in my family has been defined by a single, unspoken rule. Mark pays. It was a role assigned to me so early in life that I honestly cannot pinpoint the exact moment it began. I just know that by the time I was a teenager, I was already the designated safety net. I am 38 years old now. I work as a senior systems architect for a mid-sized tech firm. A job that pays well, demands 50 to 60 hours of my week, and leaves me perpetually drained. I am single. My last serious relationship ended 3 years ago, largely because my ex-fiancée, Sarah, finally grew exhausted by the endless parade of financial emergencies my family somehow always managed to conjure out of thin air. She warned me. She told me I was being bled dry, that I was setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I didn't listen. Or rather, I couldn't listen. The guilt had been conditioned into me like a reflex. To understand the depths of my resentment, you have to understand the architects of my misery. My older brother, Craig, and my younger sister, Chloe. Craig is 42, a man who has never met a get-rich-quick scheme he didn't absolutely adore. He is a charismatic, silver-tongued visionary, at least in his own mind. In reality, he is a serial failure who constantly needs bridge loans to keep his life from collapsing. There was the artisan jerky company in 2014 that cost me $12,000. There was the cryptocurrency mining rig setup in 2018 that siphoned $15,000 from my savings. Most recently, there was the boutique landscaping business that he ran into the ground, leaving him with a mountain of equipment debt that he tearfully begged me to help him consolidate. Craig is married to a woman named Brenda, and they have two beautiful, innocent kids, Leo and Mia. Whenever Craig needed money, he didn't just ask. He weaponized his children. "Mark, I know it's a lot, but if I lose the truck, I lose my livelihood. I don't know how I'm going to put food on the table for Leo and Mia. You don't want your nephew going hungry, do you?" It was emotional extortion of the highest order, and it worked. Every single time. Then there is Chloe. Chloe is 33 and suffers from what I can only describe as terminal main character syndrome. She has never held a job for longer than 8 months. She believes that the universe owes her a life of luxury simply because she exists. When our parents passed away 6 years ago, leaving behind nothing but a heavily mortgaged house and a mountain of medical debt, which I paid off, Chloe declared that she was too grief-stricken to work and moved into my spare bedroom. She lived rent-free for 2 years, running up my utility bills, drinking my expensive wine, and treating me like the help. When she finally met a guy and decided to get married, she planned a massive, Pinterest-perfect destination wedding in Tulum, Mexico. The problem? Her fiancé was a part-time yoga instructor, and she was unemployed. Guess who paid the $25,000 deposit? If you guessed Mark, the human ATM, you would be correct. I paid for the flights, the catering, the floral arrangements that had to be flown in from Costa Rica, and the open bar. During the reception, she gave a toast thanking her manifestation crystals and her spirit guides for making the day possible. She didn't mention my name once. For years, I justified it. I told myself that family is family. I told myself that because I made good money and had no kids of my own, it was my duty to take care of them. I suppressed the blinding rage that flared up every time I checked my bank account and saw my hard-earned savings decimated by their entitlement. I lived in a modest, cramped 2-bedroom apartment. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper. I ate generic brand cereal and bought my clothes on clearance. I was a well-paid professional living like a struggling college student, so that my brother could drive a leased luxury SUV and my sister could post photos of her organic matcha lattes on Instagram. The breaking point didn't come with a dramatic explosion. It came with a dull, sickening realization of my own pathetic reality. I was sitting in my living room on a rainy Tuesday evening, reviewing my finances. I was exhausted. I had just worked a 14-hour shift migrating a massive database for a client. My back ached, my eyes were dry, and I was eating a microwave dinner. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Craig. Not, "Hey, how are you?" Not, "Good job on that big project." Just a link to a GoFundMe he had set up for his new podcast studio, along with a message. "Need a seed investor, bro. Don't leave me hanging." Put in 5K and I'll give you an executive producer credit. 10 minutes later, Chloe texted, Mark, emergency. I accidentally backed into a pole and my insurance deductible is $1,000 and I literally have $0 until Ryan gets paid. Can you Venmo me? You're a lifesaver. I stared at the two messages. I felt entirely hollowed out. There was no love in this family. There was no mutual respect. I was not a brother. I was a utility. I was an infinite resource to be mined until I was entirely depleted. I didn't reply to either of them. Instead, I grabbed my keys, walked out into the pouring rain, and drove to the corner convenience store to buy a six-pack of cheap beer. When I got to the counter, the clerk, an older guy named Sal who always smiled at me, nodded toward the lottery display. Mega Millions is up to 340 million, Mark. You feeling lucky tonight? I never played the lottery. It was a mathematical tax on the desperate, I always told myself. But that night, feeling the absolute nadir of my existence, feeling like I had nothing to lose because my family was going to bleed me dry anyway, I shrugged. Give me 5 quick picks, Sal. I shoved the ticket into my wallet, went home, drank 3 beers, ignored 4 more texts from my siblings, and fell into a dreamless, exhausted sleep. The next few days were a blur of corporate meetings and coding marathons. It wasn't until Saturday morning, while I was doing laundry, that I remembered the ticket. I pulled it out of my wallet, the paper slightly crumpled. I opened the lottery app on my phone, not expecting anything more than a $2 win. I scanned the barcode. The screen loaded. A little animation played, and then the text appeared, bold and green, searing itself into my retinas. CONGRATULATONS. You have won $20 million. I stopped breathing. The air in my apartment suddenly felt incredibly thin. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes, convinced that the sleep deprivation had finally induced a visual hallucination. I looked again, the zeros were still there. 2, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. I checked the numbers manually against the website. 12, 18, 24, 33, 49, and the mega ball was 11. My ticket had those exact numbers. It wasn't the grand prize jackpot. Someone in California had hit that. But I had hit the massive secondary pool and a multiplier that launched my winnings into the stratosphere. I collapsed onto my cheap IKEA sofa. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. $20 million. It was a number so large it felt abstract. It wasn't just money, it was time. It was freedom. It was a fortress. I sat in silence for 4 straight hours, watching the sunlight crawl across the cheap linoleum floor of my living room. I didn't cheer. I didn't pop champagne. I just cried. I cried for the years I had lost, the stress that had aged me prematurely, the sheer, crushing burden of carrying my family's financial weight for 2 decades. The burden was gone. And then a cold, sharp thought sliced through the emotional fog. Craig and Chloe, if they found out about this, they would descend upon me like vultures. They wouldn't ask, they would demand. Craig would want $3 million for a commercial real estate venture. Chloe would demand a mansion, a new luxury car, and a lifetime allowance. They would use the word family like a weapon, wielding our shared blood to hack away at my newfound security. They would assume, without a shadow of a doubt, that my money was their money. In that moment, an ironclad resolve settled over me. I wasn't going to tell them. I wasn't going to tell anyone. The next few weeks were a masterclass in covert operations. I took a sudden medical leave of absence from work, citing severe burnout. In reality, I was flying to a different state to consult with a high-net-worth financial firm and a team of ferocious estate lawyers. We set up an intricate web of blind trusts, LLCs, and holding companies. By the time I actually claimed the ticket, anonymously, through a legal entity, the money was locked down behind so many legal firewalls that even a team of forensic accountants would struggle to trace it back to Mark the IT guy. After taxes, the lump sum payout deposited into my private accounts was a staggering, breathtaking amount. My financial advisor, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn, helped me construct a diverse portfolio of index funds, municipal bonds, and low-risk investments that would generate an enormous passive income without me ever touching the principal. I was rich, filthy, unimaginably rich. Yet I returned to my tiny apartment. I still drove the dented Civic. I still ate generic cereal. I needed time to process my new reality, but my siblings didn't give me time. The texts started ramping up. Since I was on leave, I wasn't answering them as quickly. Craig was furious that I hadn't funded his podcast. Chloe was throwing a digital tantrum because her husband's credit card had been declined at a high-end sushi restaurant, and I wasn't there to bail them out. Sitting in my dim living room, staring at my phone as it vibrated with their toxic demands, an idea began to take root in my mind. A dark, twisted, but necessary idea. For my entire life, I had been told that I was part of a family. I had been told that family looks out for each other. I had done the looking out. But what if I was the one who needed help? What if the roles were reversed? Would they step up? Would they show even a fraction of the generosity I had poured into them over the years? I knew the answer. Deep down in my bones, I knew it. But I needed proof. I needed undeniable, concrete evidence that I meant absolutely nothing to them beyond my bank balance. If I was going to cut them off forever, which is what my soul was screaming at me to do, I needed a clean break. I needed them to hand me the scissors. I opened the Sibling Squad group chat. I took a deep breath, marshaling my acting skills, and typed out the lie. Mark, guys, I have some really bad news. I didn't want to say anything, but things have been bad for a while. My company did a massive restructuring, and I was laid off last month. I've been applying everywhere, but the market is dead. My emergency fund is completely gone. I had to drain the last of it to pay for the materials for Craig's roof repair back in March. I'm in a really bad spot. My landlord just gave me a pay-or-quit notice. I'm facing eviction by the end of the week. I'm terrified. I just need a tiny bit of help to hold me over until my next interview. Could you guys possibly loan me $500? Just $250 from each of you. I promise I'll pay you back the second I land a job. Please. I hit send. I sat back, my heart pounding a strange, heavy rhythm. $500. It was a fraction of what I had given them. It was the cost of one of Chloe's spa weekends. It was half a car payment for Craig's ridiculous SUV. I was asking for the bare minimum to survive. I watched the read receipts appear, first Chloe, then Craig. The silence stretched for 10 agonizing minutes. I could picture them probably calling each other, panicking not because their brother was facing homelessness, but because their primary source of funding had just dried up. Then the replies started rolling in. Chloe, OMG Mark. Are you serious right now? This is incredibly selfish of you to drop this on us. I stared at the screen, a cold numbness spreading through my chest. Selfish. She was calling me selfish. Craig, bro, what the hell? How do you get fired? You're an IT guy, aren't you supposed to be indispensable? You need to learn how to manage your finances better. You make good money, where did it all go? I typed furiously, my fingers trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. Mark, it went to you guys. I paid for the wedding, I paid off your debts, I paid for the roof, the cars, everything. I have nothing left, please, I'm going to be out on the street. Chloe, don't you dare try to guilt-trip us for your own failures. We didn't force you to pay for anything you offered. You literally ruined my mood today, thanks a lot. I don't have $250. Ryan and I are saving for a trip to Milan. Go to a homeless shelter or something until you get a job. Craig, she's right, man. You can't just act like an ATM and then play the victim when you run dry. That's pathetic. I have a family to support. Leo needs braces soon. I can't be throwing money down the drain to bail out a 38-year-old man who can't keep a job. It's time you grew up and took some responsibility. Mark, you're really going to let me get evicted over $500? After everything I've done? Craig, stop begging, it's embarrassing. You've always been a worthless failure disguised as a nice guy. You buy people's affection because you have no personality. Well, the money's gone, and so is the act. Figure it out yourself. Chloe, honestly, Mark, you're pathetic. I can't deal with this toxic energy right now. Lose my number until you get your life together. Don't contact me. The little gray text appeared at the bottom of the screen. Message not delivered. I tried calling Craig. It rang once and went straight to voicemail. I tried Chloe, same thing. They hadn't just refused to help me. They had laughed in my face, insulted my character, gaslit me about the decades of financial abuse, and then blocked my number. They discarded me like a broken appliance. I set the phone down on the coffee table. The apartment was dead silent. I expected to feel devastated. I expected to cry. But as I sat there, absorbing the sheer, breathtaking cruelty of my own flesh and blood, a strange sensation washed over me. It was peace. The heavy, suffocating chain that had bound me to them for 38 years simply snapped. The obligation evaporated. The guilt was completely, utterly incinerated by the fury that took its place. They had passed the test, and in doing so, they had sealed their own fate. The month of shadows began. I didn't reach out to them. I let them believe I had been evicted. I let them believe I was sleeping in my car or on a friend's couch. Instead, I officially resigned from my job. I packed up the few sentimental items in my apartment, left the cheap furniture behind, and paid the landlord out of the lease. With Evelyn's help, I began the search for a new home. I didn't want a flashy penthouse in the city. I wanted space. I wanted grandeur. I found it in an estate nestled in the rolling hills of the countryside, about 40 miles outside the city. It was a sprawling, modern classical mansion sitting on 20 acres of pristine land. It had 8 bedrooms, a sweeping double staircase in the grand foyer, a massive chef's kitchen, an infinity pool, and a private screening room. The property was shielded from the main road by a long, winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees. It cost me $4.5 million in cash. Walking through the empty, echoing halls for the first time, my footsteps clicking against the imported marble, I felt like a ghost who had finally found his castle. I hired top-tier interior designers and gave them a blank check and a 3-week deadline to furnish the entire first floor and the master suite. Money, as I quickly learned, accelerates everything. Within 3 weeks, the house was transformed into a masterpiece of modern luxury. Plush velvet sofas, abstract art, brilliant chandeliers, and state-of-the-art technology. It was breathtaking, but I wasn't just busy buying a house. I was busy orchestrating my masterpiece. I contacted Evelyn and the legal team to draft the trust funds. This was the most crucial part of the plan. I may have hated my siblings, but I did not hate their children. Leo, Mia, and Chloe's little girl, Lily, were innocent. They were just kids, growing up in households run by narcissists. I wanted to ensure they had a future, but I had to make absolutely certain that Craig and Chloe could never, ever touch the money. We created 3 irrevocable, highly restrictive trust funds. $1 million was deposited into each trust. The conditions were draconian, designed by the most paranoid lawyers money could buy. The funds could only be accessed when the children turned 25. Prior to that, the money could only be dispersed for specific educational or medical expenses, and those disbursements were paid directly to the institutions, never to the parents. If Craig or Chloe ever attempted to legally challenge the trusts or gain access to the capital, a poison pill clause would activate, immediately freezing the accounts and transferring the administrative rights to an independent third-party legal firm that would fight them into bankruptcy. My siblings were going to be locked out of the millions forever. With the legal trap set, it was time to bait the hook. My family is large. My father had 4 siblings, my mother had 3. I have aunts, uncles, and dozens of cousins scattered across the state. For years, Craig and Chloe had played the golden children to the extended family. At Thanksgiving dinners and summer barbecues, they would boast about their businesses and their investments, painting me as the quiet, boring IT guy who just plodded along. The extended family bought it. They thought Craig was an entrepreneurial genius who just had bad luck, and they thought Chloe was a cosmopolitan trendsetter. I never corrected them. I was too tired. Now I was going to tear the facade down to the studs. I hired a boutique event planning agency. I instructed them to design an ultra-exclusive, high-end gala. I gave them the guest list. Every single aunt, uncle, and cousin in my extended family, along with a few of my parents' oldest friends. The invitations were sent out on thick, embossed cardstock delivered by courier. The text was deliberately mysterious. You are cordially invited to an exclusive evening of dining and celebration honoring the legacy of the extended family. Hosted by a mysterious benefactor. Formal attire required. A private car will be provided for your transportation. It was exactly the kind of pretentious, high-society nonsense that Craig and Chloe lived for. I knew the extended family would be buzzing with curiosity. Who was the benefactor? Was it a long-lost wealthy relative? Had someone won a massive settlement? The aunts and uncles, being deeply nosy, immediately RSVP'd yes. I knew Craig and Chloe would be entirely out of the loop. They wouldn't know who the benefactor was, but their egos wouldn't allow them to miss an exclusive event where free food and alcohol were involved, especially if the whole family was going. I had the event planners arrange for luxury black SUVs to pick up every guest, ensuring nobody had an excuse not to attend. The night of the gala arrived. The mansion looked spectacular. The long driveway was lined with soft, glowing lanterns. Valets stood at attention near the grand entrance. Inside, a string quartet was playing in the corner of the massive foyer. Waiters in crisp black uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, caviar on blinis, wagyu beef tartare, truffled arancini. I was not in the foyer. I was upstairs in the master suite, standing by the massive window looking down at the driveway. I wore a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, midnight blue, perfectly fitted to my frame. I looked like a completely different man. The hunched, exhausted, stressed-out Mark was dead. The man looking back at me in the mirror was cold, wealthy, and dangerous. The cars began to arrive. I watched as my extended family stepped out, their jaws dropping at the sheer scale of the estate. Aunt Susan and Uncle Bob looked around in bewildered awe. My cousins took out their phones, immediately snapping pictures for social media. And then I saw them. Craig and Brenda stepped out of a black Escalade. Craig was wearing a poorly fitted suit that he probably rented. He looked around, his eyes wide with greed, trying to calculate the net worth of whoever owned the property. A moment later, Chloe and her husband Ryan arrived. Chloe was wearing a flashy, inappropriate sequined dress, already holding a glass of champagne she had snatched from a waiter at the door. I watched them mingle, puffing out their chests, acting as if they belonged in a place like this. They probably assumed the benefactor was someone who was finally going to recognize their genius. I gave them an hour to drink, to eat, to boast to the aunts and uncles about their latest fictitious successes. An hour to establish their lies before I burned them to ash. Down in the grand foyer, the event planner tapped a microphone. The string quartet faded to silence. The low murmur of 70 family members hushed. "Ladies and gentlemen," the planner announced, her voice echoing off the marble. "If I could direct your attention to the grand staircase, your host for the evening has arrived." The lights in the foyer dimmed slightly, leaving a dramatic spotlight illuminating the top of the double staircase. I took a deep breath, adjusted my cuffs, and stepped out from the shadows. A collective gasp echoed through the cavernous room. I looked down at the sea of faces. Aunt Susan dropped her purse. Uncle Bob let out a quiet, "What in the hell?" But my eyes were locked directly on my siblings. Craig's face had drained of all color. He looked like he had just been punched in the stomach. His mouth was hanging open, his eyes darting frantically around the opulent surroundings, and then back to me, trying to compute the impossible data. Chloe had frozen mid-sip of her champagne. Her eyes were wide, blinking rapidly, her brain short-circuiting. The brother they had blocked, the brother they thought was begging for change on a street corner, was standing at the top of a multi-million-dollar staircase looking like a titan of industry. I walked down the stairs slowly, deliberately, the click of my dress shoes echoing in the absolute silence. I reached the bottom landing and smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. "Welcome," I said, my voice steady and amplified by the acoustics of the room. "Thank you all for coming. I know the invitation was a bit dramatic, but considering the circumstances, I felt it was appropriate. Welcome to my home." Pandemonium broke out. Aunts and uncles started shouting over each other. "Mark, this is your house. How did you afford this? What is going on?" I held up a hand, silencing them. "Please. All will be explained. But first, let me address the two people in the room who look like they've seen a ghost." I turned my gaze to Craig and Chloe. They were standing near the front, looking small, pathetic, and utterly terrified. "Craig." "Chloe," I said smoothly. "You both look a little surprised. Weren't you expecting me?" "Oh, wait, that's right, you blocked my number." A murmur rippled through the extended family. "Mark, buddy," Craig stammered, stepping forward, his salesman instincts desperately trying to kick in despite his panic. What is this? Did you hit big on a crypto trade? Man, I always knew you had it in you. Why didn't you tell us?" Yeah, Mark, Chloe chimed in, her voice high-pitched and nervous. We've been so worried about you, you just disappeared. The sheer audacity of the lie was breathtaking. I felt the anger boil up, but I kept it perfectly contained. I snapped my fingers. Behind me, an enormous 80-inch television screen, which had been hidden behind a velvet curtain, suddenly powered on. The screen synced to my phone. Worried about me? I repeated, tasting the words. That's an interesting way to phrase it, Chloe, because exactly 32 days ago, I reached out to both of you in our group chat. I told you I had lost my job. I told you I had drained my emergency fund paying for Craig's roof. I told you I was facing eviction and homelessness. I asked my beloved brother and sister for a simple $500 loan to keep me off the street. The entire room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Aunt Susan covered her mouth with her hand. And do you know what they said to me, family? I asked the room, raising my voice. Do you want to know how the golden children responded when the brother who funded their entire adult lives finally asked for a fraction of help? I pressed a button on a remote in my hand. The giant screen illuminated. There it was. The entire group chat history blown up to massive proportions for everyone to see. Every vile insult, every cruel rejection. I began to read them aloud, my voice echoing like thunder in the grand room. Don't you dare try to guilt-trip us for your own failures, I read Chloe's text. You literally ruined my mood today. Go to a homeless shelter or something. I heard several aunts gasp. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Chloe's face turned beet red. She shrank back against her husband, who was staring at her in horror. I clicked to the next slide. You can't just act like an ATM and then play the victim when you run dry. I read Craig's text, mimicking his arrogant tone. Stop begging, it's embarrassing. You've always been a worthless failure disguised as a nice guy. Craig looked like he was going to vomit. Uncle Bob, a burly, no-nonsense man, took a step toward Craig, his face purple with rage. You little piece of shit, Uncle Bob growled. He paid for your business. He paid for your wedding. You left him to get evicted over $500. It was a misunderstanding, Craig stammered, sweating profusely, waving his hands defensively. We were stressed. We didn't mean it. You meant every word, I said coldly, cutting him off. You revealed exactly who you are. You revealed that I am nothing but a wallet to you. You drained me of tens of thousands of dollars over the years. You manipulated me using your children. You bled me dry, and the second I needed a drop of water, you spat in my face and blocked my number. I walked closer to them. The crowd parted for me. I stood directly in front of my brother and sister, looking down at them. Well, I have a confession to make, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper that somehow carried across the room. I was never fired. I was never facing eviction. It was a test to see if you had a single ounce of humanity or love for your brother left in your greedy, selfish hearts. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. A week before I sent that text, I continued, I hit the lottery. I walked away with $20 million tax-free. The reaction was explosive. Shouts, gasps, crying, but Craig and Chloe didn't move. They looked as though they had been struck by lightning. $20 million. The number crashed into their minds, shattering their reality. I could see the frantic, desperate math happening in their eyes. The yachts, the cars, the mansions they could have had. The empire they could have built if they had just given me $500 miserable dollars. 20 million, Craig choked out, his voice barely a squeak. His knees actually buckled slightly. Mark, we're family. We love you. You know I'm stressed with the business. I'm so sorry. I was out of line. Please, let's talk about this. Mark, I'm so sorry, Chloe wailed, actual tears streaming down her face. Tears not of remorse, but of catastrophic financial loss. I was just having a bad day. I didn't mean it. We're blood. Blood, I scoffed, turning my back on them and walking back to the stairs. Blood is what leeches drink, and I am done being fed upon. I turned to face the room again. Family. I invited you all here tonight for two reasons. The first was to expose these two frauds for exactly who they are, so they can never lie to you or manipulate you for sympathy again. You all know the truth now. I looked over at Brenda, Craig's wife, who was quietly sobbing, and Ryan, Chloe's husband, who looked completely humiliated. The second reason, I continued, is to announce the future. Craig, Chloe, you are both terrible people, but your children are innocent. They do not deserve to suffer because their parents are narcissistic parasites. I pulled a thick manila folder from inside my suit jacket. I have set up 3 irrevocable trust funds, I announced. One for Leo, one for Mia, and one for Lily. Each trust is funded with $1 million. It will pay for their college in full, and the remainder will unlock when they turn 25. Brenda let out a loud sob of relief and gratitude, covering her face. Craig's eyes lit up with a sudden feral greed. Mark, oh my God, Mark, thank you, thank you. As their legal guardian, I can manage the funds I can. You won't touch a single penny, I interrupted, my voice like cracking a whip. The trusts are heavily restricted. If you or Chloe ever attempt to access the capital or challenge the trusts in court, a poison pill clause will activate. The money will be frozen, and a team of corporate lawyers will bankrupt you with legal fees before you ever see a dime. The money is for the children, not for your failed businesses, not for your vacations. Craig's face crumpled in agony. Chloe let out a sharp, hysterical sob. They were close enough to the money to smell it, to see it securing their children's futures, but they were permanently, legally locked out of the vault. It was a psychological torture designed specifically for them. As for the 2 of you, I said, looking at my brother and sister for what I decided would be the very last time in my life. You will never receive another cent from me. You will never set foot in this house again. You will never call me, text me, or acknowledge my existence. If you do, I will use my infinite resources to make your lives a legal and financial living hell. I gestured to the massive oak front doors. You failed the test. You showed your true colors. And now you get to live with the consequences of losing $20 million because you wouldn't part with 500. Get out of my house. Nobody moved. The extended family just stared at them in disgust. Uncle Bob pointed a thick, calloused finger at the door. You heard him, Bob growled. Get the hell out. Slowly, agonizingly, Craig and Chloe turned around. They looked utterly broken. Stripped of their pride, stripped of their facade, and stripped of the greatest financial windfall they would ever encounter in their miserable lives. They walked out into the cool night air, the heavy wooden doors shutting behind them with a definitive, satisfying thud. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Aunt Susan walked up to me, tears in her eyes, and pulled me into a tight hug. I am so sorry, Mark, she whispered. We never knew. We never knew what they were doing to you. The rest of the night was a blur of catharsis. I drank expensive champagne with my uncles. I laughed with my cousins. For the first time in 38 years, I wasn't the bank. I wasn't the safety net. I was just Mark. I had surgically excised the cancer from my life, and I was finally, truly free. The aftermath has been remarkably